Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jordan Hill. With me this week is Kipp Adams. Appreciate everybody watching on StreamYard and also on Facebook Live this week. We're coming to you on Friday afternoon. Kipp, we survived SEC Media Days. How is this Friday afternoon treating you so far?
Yeah, I guess we survived it. It's the media days are over. The week is not, but it's been an interesting week. I didn't know what to really expect, and obviously the biggest news of the week for Georgia actually came after Georgia was actually done with their section of the SEC Media Days. So plenty for us to talk about today, but I think it's overall it's been a pretty good week for us as far as being able to give the latest in Georgia football, give our take, and kind of lock in as we prepare for the upcoming season, because this is it. This solidifies the fact that the season is right around the corner. When we have our all SEC preseason teams come out, the order of finish has been put out as well by the media. So, I mean, we're here. It's time to get started with fall camp. I think the offseason, which there really isn't an offseason, but the offseason is officially over, I think, for college football.
Yeah, to me, this is always kind of the milestone in the off season. It's once you get through media days, you're going to turn around and fall camp will probably be here that maybe second week of August, something like that. And then before we know it, September 3rd is going to get here in that opener against Oregon. But I welcome it. Excited to get to the new season. Excited just to discuss and get to see what this team does in 2022. Well, let's jump into it talking really about SEC Media Days. And I think we'd be remiss if we don't start with what was the big news. It came out on Thursday. I was sitting in the main room where I believe at the time Josh Heupel might have been talking, Tennessee's coach. And I got an email from Georgia Sportscom. The contract has come in. We've talked about it a few different times. I've written a few stories about it. Kirby Smart's new deal is officially signed, sealed, and delivered. 10-year extension goes through the 2031 season. It's worth a total of $112.5 million. Makes Kirby one of the highest paid coaches, if not the highest paid coach in the country. Really no surprise in that front, winning a national title last January. Obviously, the amount of success Georgia's had. Wrote this in a column after the news was announced that Kirby has the third highest winning percentage overall of any coach in the country. I mean, you think about that, especially at this point with as many seasons as he has under his belt. That's not a small sample size. Kirby's done such a good job of putting Georgia among the elite in college football and keeping them there. You know, they've done a very good job. As I mentioned in the column, a few bumps in the road early. You know, I was still a student his first season and, just narrowly avoided a loss to Nicholls State, lost to Vanderbilt, had some tough times early on, but credit to those guys. They figured it out, and obviously Georgia is one of the marquee teams in the country. Kipp, what are your thoughts on the extension, on the fact that Georgia and Kirby came together and agreed on this deal and securing his status going forward as the Bulldogs head coach?
I mean, this is inevitable. We all knew this since even when Georgia made it to the national championship again. We knew Kirby Smart was probably in line to get a pay raise. Obviously, when they won it all, we knew this day would come this offseason, and we should have known that Georgia would have waited until Kirby Smart was done speaking with the media to announce this deal. Now it doesn't have to answer any questions. It's interesting that for some people are wanting Kirby Smart to still answer questions about the contract. I don't know if there was a big brushback when we saw again these are contracts that these guys are earning. It's a free market, but when Nick Saban gets his contract extensions, there really isn't anyone questioning that. I think you look at Lincoln Riley, the deal that he got at USC. Everyone talked about how great of a deal it was. And Kirby Smart, did exactly what everyone had been screaming for somebody to do at Georgia, for the entire 21st century. He got it done, got the contract that is within line and fair for what he's brought to Georgia. over the last 6+ years. And yet the timing of it was very interesting just because we're still talking about name, image, and likeness. And I think it's fascinating to me as we cover Georgia to see a lot of people who don't cover Georgia on a day-to-day basis kind of trying to use Kirby Smart's contract as their own talking point, their own gotcha moment for name, image, and likeness, and using his own quotes against him without using the full context of them. It's just fascinating. As far as the actual contract is concerned, that's exactly what you would expect. Everyone had said it would be over $100 million. It would probably be 10 years. And so, that's right in line with where it was. And that's exactly what you should give your head coach when he brings a national championship and he's not planning on going anywhere anytime soon. And he has your program recruiting at an elite level. That is the going rate right now. It's the same in college as it is in the NFL. Head coaches get paid a lot of money. That's not the income pool that, is affecting anything else. It's not affecting any student athletes out there, and it's not affecting name, image, and likeness. And for a coach who just came out there and pointed out that 95 Georgia players got NIL money, we don't know for a fact, but he also pointed out that Jordan Davis, Keely Ringo, and Brock Bowers were getting the most at their positions. I think that as a head coach is probably supporting name, image, and likeness, and Kirby Smart has said as much from the beginning. So I just think it was very interesting that we got immediately when Kirby Smart got his contract announced. We got this big everyone kind of going on their pulpits and proclaiming that pay the players when it's got nothing to do with players being paid. They have their own open market now, and they're able to earn whatever they can, and it's got nothing to do with Kirby Smart. So I think it's great for Georgia. He got his contract, and it was a good week for Georgia. It was just interesting. As soon as Georgia wins the national championship and they keep their head coach for the near future, that there's some weird negative quotes or I guess takes being put out there to try to kind of brush back against that. I guess that's when you've made it as a program, when people are trying to use that to kind of push their own agenda out there.
Yeah, when you're made into a talking point, whether it's accurate or not, that means you're probably among the top teams. A couple things you said there, Kipp, that I wanted to hit on. It was kind of funny as far as the timing. It worked out well for Georgia because that might have been, a day or so after those comments at the Texas High School Association were overblown. It was a situation where what was said kind of got overblown, and Kirby had used a little hyperbole about his future. Well, then he turns around and signs a 10-year deal. Obviously, that makes it clear that, he's sticking around and he's going to be in Athens coaching for quite a while. And also the NIL thing, I was very intrigued by the way Kirby talked about NIL, both with us. Some of the local media had a chance to meet with Kirby and the players before they all went to the main room. So, we got to hear a few different things that weren't exactly said in front of everybody else. But Kirby kind of doubled down on the point he made with us as well as with the entire media that were in the main room in Atlanta. Using examples, using Dan Jackson having an NIL deal, the fact he's a walk-on. Talking about players who, one of the players has a dad that's sick on dialysis and using that money for that. I thought that was really moving, and I think that's one of those things that the people that are pushing back on the people that you were talking about, Kipp, the people that are like, oh, Kirby's, against NIL, I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, he understands, and I think too, being a former player, he knows what these guys have gone through. I mean, he's been in their shoes. He understands, that, and again, NIL wasn't a thing back when Kirby played. That was something too. Mentioning Josh Heupel again, Josh talked about that when he was at the stage. He played at Oklahoma, was a quarterback, and he was like, we want our guys to make money. And he was like, heck, I wish NIL would have been around when I was in school. I feel like that was sort of the approach Kirby took. He just wants guardrails, and he's not the only one. I know Jimbo Fisher talked about it, other coaches as well, to kind of make sure that it's not a part of the recruiting process, rather, something that rewards these kids once they're at their respective schools and allows them to make a little money. Because I mean, it's a job. These guys, are working, and there's not a whole lot of downtime that they are not spending involved with football. But yeah, with the NIL part of it, I really thought Kirby, in talking to the media, took the right approach in explaining what he likes about it, what he doesn't like about it, and it fit in line with what we kept hearing. It fit in line with what's been pretty much what I can tell the consensus from the other coaches, is that we're in a situation where they opened Pandora's box with this and then decided afterwards to try to, put the toothpaste back in the tube. And brother, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, the whole point is the fact that we have a name, image, and likeness system is because the NCAA and the schools fought so long against it, and so that's why the system we have isn't really a system. And you hear the terms "wild, wild west" so often right now. It's because nobody was able to agree on how to pay college student athletes, and so it got pushed into we're not going to figure it out. You guys figure it out. And so everyone's figuring it out on their own. And there's different rules in every state and different interpretations. And so this is what you have when, there's no regulation. And so you can't really blame that, on Kirby Smart or, again, the fact that he got a new contract. I just found it fascinating. We do live in a day and age where you can cut up a quote to make it mean anything you want. And that certainly happened this week multiple times from different outlets with Kirby Smart's quotes. But at the end of the day, yeah, as you pointed out and start this conversation, he got a long-term contract. And I think that's a pretty big news for a school that earlier this week, some people maybe thought that Kirby Smart was ready to resign a year ago, taking other quotes out of context when he spoke to the High School Coaches Association in Texas and talked about just the long hours that went into the job in June 2021, having all those recruits on campus. That quote got taken out of context, and here we are, more quotes getting taken out of context. It's just kind of the way that, it is for us right now these days, Jordan, in the media, and being journalists, trying to cover everything accurately and fairly. It's a bigger battle than I think it ever has been. But at the end of the day, I think Georgia is handling NIL as well as any program. I think the collective that they have partnered with is trying to build a sustainable system for its student athletes. And I think the partnering with Truist Bank and just educating its players on how to handle, having a different stream of income that they've never had before. I think that's probably a good move as well, but that didn't get blown up as much this week. It wasn't viral. But for Georgia, I think that they're doing the right things and locking up their coach long term, obviously a big deal as well. So I think overall, like we said, it's a very good week for Georgia football. And I think, they're set up to do very well for the near future, regardless of where name, image, and likeness goes, or whether we find, maybe they recognize student athletes as employees down the road. Then we're talking about income streams being kind of shared. It's a whole different ball game when we get to that. But for right now, the way things are right now, Georgia's in a really great place and set up for probably another really big season under Kirby Smart.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I wanted to hit on just something I wrote in a column after the news was announced. I looked at it as looking at this contract from both sides. You look at it from Kirby's side, Georgia alum, as we all know, was an Alabama assistant, was one of the marquee, if not the marquee assistant that people kept looking at as a potential head coach. Kirby waited it out. He passed on, certain opportunities he could have had to be a head coach. And then the Georgia job opened, and he landed what I think is fair to describe as his dream job. And, on the other side, you've got Georgia that, they took a big gamble when they fired Mark Richt, because even if it felt like things had tailed off, which being around the program then, I think was fair to say, they still had won 10 games the last season Mark was there. So there was risk on that side, and you wondered and had questions about what would happen. But Georgia landed Kirby, and obviously both sides have had a lot of success, particularly from 2017 on. It was a situation as far as a contract goes where, it was a no-brainer for both sides. You know that the commitment is there from Georgia. They were obviously going to keep one of the marquee coaches in the country, and they paid top dollar to do it. And it was money that Kirby has earned. Again, that's just the nature of college head coaching. These coaches make a lot of money, and given what the market is and given what it takes as far as paying these coaches, Kirby is worth those top dollars. Played for 2 national titles and won one of them. Clearly that I think it was in everybody's best interest to get this deal done and set themselves up well for what's going to happen next.
Definitely. I think Georgia's in a great spot right now. They got what has already been mentioned by some experts, a bargain. And I think you kind of laugh initially at that. The fact that he's now the highest paid coach in college football, both overall salary or overall income and average salary. But I think you're just going to see those numbers skyrocket in the near future. And we'll probably have a Nick Saban $11 million a year deal announced before the season starts. I actually think he has a kicker in his contract. I think it's for the average of the top 3 salaries. It automatically kicks in. But anytime you see somebody else go to the top, you have to wonder, when will Saban get his next contract? It'll probably be pretty soon. And as he said at SC Media Days, he's not planning on going away anytime soon. So again, I think this is a great rivalry for college football, and I think Georgia is built to last. And that's good news, because I've covered this program for over 16 years. I've seen the ups and downs, and I think if you look at the fact that they've basically had 3 losses in the last 4 non-COVID seasons. Kirby Smart has built this program to take that next step, and they have, and I think they're going to continue doing that for the near future.
Well, we're going to go to a break here in a second, but first I want to make sure and tell everybody, if you're watching us on Facebook, do us a favor, head on over to the Dogs 247 YouTube channel and subscribe. If you do that, you'll get notifications every time we go live, and we'll make sure and drop the link in the comments below so you guys can see it, and make sure and click on it and subscribe. So real quick, we'll take a break. We'll come back, talk a little bit more about media days, and then talk about these next few days for Georgia's recruiting. We got some big announcements coming down the pipe, and talk a little bit about what we expect there. Welcome back, everybody. Well, yeah, let's jump back into SEC Media Days. Georgia went on Wednesday, was at the beginning or right after Arkansas and Sam Pittman, and we had a chance to listen to what Georgia had to say. I will say it was very interesting with Arkansas and Georgia going first. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we had a chance to talk to Kirby. Then the 3 players, Stetson Bennett, Cedric Van Pran, and Nolan Smith, before they went out there to the main stage, where you guys, if you watched on TV, that's where you would have seen those guys. And there was a little bit of a moment of overlap where Georgia was going out and Arkansas was coming in, and got to see Sam Pittman and Kirby Smart catch out. And that was really cool. You could just tell. And Sam Pittman talked about this on the main stage, just how much Kirby has meant to him, and the opportunity that Sam ultimately got to be the head coach at Arkansas. That was because of the success at Georgia. I mean, that was at least part of the reason Arkansas considered him. So that was really neat to see that kind of relationship and that interaction. But I want to talk a little bit about what we got to hear from the players, and I can kind of start. I was there on the ground in Atlanta, had a chance to talk to all 3 players. Was really struck by Stetson Bennett, just getting a chance to listen to him. I asked him about the spring. He had told us really at the very beginning of camp, might have been the second week, that he really wanted to pull a lot out of the spring, that first spring being QB1. And I asked him what he took from that time, and he really emphasized the relationships. And I think that was something that we had all kind of keyed on. I mean, the fact that he was going to have a spring, working with those ones, being able to get on the same page, figure out too with offensive coordinator Todd Monken, what plays I like, what plays I don't like. I think there was a lot of value taken from this spring, and I think that it'll only do Stetson a world of good. Want to shout out to he was asked. I'll shout out the Athletic Seth Emerson asked him if he knew who Rodney Dangerfield was. Kind of going with the don't get any respect line, and Stetson said he did. And he said the reason he did was because Stetson's a big fan of Norm Macdonald. So I was like, all right, a fan of Norm Macdonald, that's something that's a plus in my book. Talking about the other guys too, Nolan Smith. I really spent the most time with Nolan once they got out into the main room, and just kind of getting to see how he's grown as a leader. I mean, he talked about the fact that he understood that was asked of him now, especially being a senior, being a guy that's been around the program and understands the standards. But it really struck me that it doesn't seem like Nolan's the kind of guy that is going to change who he is. Talked about the way he is sort of lighthearted with the team. Kirby talked about the gift he gave him at Christmas, gave him a little Just for Men to, try to get that gray in hair a little bit darker. So that was pretty neat to hear that. And then Cedric, too, gave us some really good insight on Stacy Searles now having a spring, under his belt back in Athens. Really seemed like, Cedric's taking that to the way he's being coached, and that it is a little bit different than, what they were used to with Matt Luke. But I think it can be really productive. And that was a sense I got from Cedric. It seemed like, I pointed out when I was talking to Cedric, he's one of the younger guys that was at media days. I mean, only going to be a redshirt sophomore. But I thought he took that really as an honor, being trusted to be out there and have a chance to represent his team. It was just really interesting to talk to those guys. And then with Kirby, too, a lot of just really helpful stuff as far as injury updates and heard good things about Tyke Smith, Tate Ratledge. But the thing that really stood out to me was the fact that, Kirby is, again, sort of repeating what we got to hear in the spring about not really worried about 2021. He was asked about, his players resting on their laurels. And I heard him say this a few different times, that he feels like these players have no laurels to rest on. There were 15 guys on this team that were drafted in the NFL. 5 of those guys, all 5 on the defense, were first rounders. He really wants it to be known among this team and with his players that these guys haven't earned anything. Obviously, several of these guys played meaningful roles on both sides of the ball on that championship team. But, you've lost to Jordan Davis. You've lost to Nakobe Dean. You've lost a lot of talent to starting offensive linemen. There are guys going to be put in positions this year that they were not in going back to January 10th when they won that national title game. And I think that he really wants to make that clear. And just talking from the players, I think that is accepted. He talked about, Cedric talked a little bit about the emphasis Kirby has made on really having them study, giants who have fallen, whether it was teams, which I tried to get Nolan Smith to tell me what teams did you guys kind of look at from the past? And Nolan basically was like, I'm not going to answer that. Not going to throw anybody under the bus. But seeing examples of teams, and they even said lessons from history of giants that, whether it be hubris or for whatever reason, couldn't back up, what was a strong start or something worth celebrating. So very interesting to hear that. I want to ask you, Kipp, just from what you got to see, what sort of stood out to you or any quotes that you had a chance to check out? What really stood out from the Georgia perspective as far as media days?
I mean, definitely just backing up what you said, the fact that Kirby Smart is, still fighting complacency. It's the thing he hates as a head coach. He never wants his team to feel that way. So he's going to remind them, that they lost all these guys to the draft. And once again, it's a situation where Georgia is replacing a lot of starters, but the same thing was said last year. This defense is replacing so many starters. We sent all these defensive backs into the NFL draft. How are they going to replace all these guys? We they lost Jermaine Johnson to transfer. Tyreek Stevenson left via transfer as well. And we saw what happened with that defense. This is what Kirby Smart, his whole goal of building a program that can be, that can go again, that can prove that, it's not about rebuilding. It is about reloading. They want to be NFL draft proof. They want to be transfer proof. And you just do that by trying to get the best 85 you can on the roster at one time. And I think you look at this roster and you could see, you mentioned Cedric Van Pran, how young he is, but some of Georgia's best players are the younger players. I mean, the fact that they had the best tight end in college football as a true freshman, and now, nationally, he is seen that way. Brock Bowers being the best tight end in the country, but the fact that, again, they are going to be able to trot out Darnell Washington and Arik Gilbert. And Kirby Smart pointed out that fact. We got Darnell Washington too. And I think Nolan Smith asked about that. He didn't even want to give away too much, about getting them all in the field at the same time, because, that's part of their playbook. And that tells you that, they're going to have the ability on offense to create a lot of mismatches. And you look at Jermaine Burton going to Alabama, and now, he's an SEC preseason all first team selection. Georgia's going to be fine there because they have guys who can create mismatches. Just because, they might not have a wide receiver next to their name does not mean they're not going to be able to make big plays. And I just think looking at that group and then thinking back at last year, they had John Fitzpatrick back out there replacing him with Gilbert. You're going to get a different look of three tight ends out there. And I just think that's the one thing that reminded me is do not forget about Darnell Washington. I think he's going to, make people remember that, when he burst onto the scene, that there aren't guys that big able to get out there, get separation, catch passes. There just aren't. You don't see them that often. And the fact that he can move people, at the same time at that position, I think that it's going to be something to watch this year. And I think that Georgia's offense is going to be a strength and one of the most explosive in the country. And I think you look at the wide receiver core of guys they have coming back with A.D. Mitchell, Dominic Blaylock, Lad McConkey, Kyrus Jackson. None of those guys made, all SEC at wide receiver. So I think Kirby Smart has plenty of motivation for those guys to go out there and prove they're some of the best pass catchers in the conference as well. So when that all conference team came out and Georgia had 9 guys on there, Kirby Smart's just thinking about the guys that weren't on that list. And automatically he's got plenty of, locker room fuel for those guys. And that's what he loves. And so I think that's what I took away is Georgia's the defending national champions, but to a lot of people, they still have a lot to prove. And I don't think Kirby Smart would want it any other way.
You talked about the tight ends. I asked Shane Beamer, the guy that, once upon a time was the tight ends coach at Georgia, just what he thought about the current room. And I think the 2 words he said right off the top was deep and talented. And I think that's pretty apt description. And the only other thing I want to throw in just from the players, and Kirby talked about this too, about what they felt like was disrespect or lack of respect for Stetson Bennett, which I had hit on earlier. And I was really struck by Kirby essentially saying on the main stage, if people want to keep doubting him, go right ahead. They understand that, people may not have him as among the best quarterbacks, but clearly he got the job done this last year, and Georgia's counting on him to do that again this year.
Definitely. I think with Stetson Bennett, I mean, is he a top 5 quarterback in the SEC? What are our criteria here? Because statistically, he was a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the SEC last season by most statistical measures. And so the fact that he's coming back and he's one of the leaders in the country as far as passing efficiency, I think, people are looking at, it's not just measurables, because Bryce Young, we saw Stetson Bennett and Bryce Young, they're eye to eye. We saw them in the national championship. That, I don't think you can just look at size, and you have to put the fact that he wasn't on scholarship when he came in the back burner too, because we've seen walk-ons win the Heisman at quarterback in recent years, with Baker Mayfield. So I don't know exactly what people are looking for, what the criteria are for ranking SEC quarterbacks, but I think that they're probably moving the goalposts to make sure the guys that fit what they think they're looking for in a quarterback, those are the guys that they pick, whether that's the NFL draft. Okay. But for as far as the SEC and college football goes, Stetson Bennett's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And I think, at the end of the day, is he going to have a top 5 season at his position in the SEC? I think there's a very good chance of that. I mean, if he throws for 3,600 yards, over 30 touchdowns, and pushes for 70% completion percentage, I'd be hard pressed to find 3 or 4 quarterbacks who are going to beat that kind of production. So I don't know what else you want to look for, but I think Stetson Bennett is definitely should be in the mix. Maybe not top 3, but definitely top 5 quarterbacks. And he did not make any top 5 quarterback lists I saw watching, media days all week on SEC Network.
Before we get out of here, Kipp, let's talk a little bit about the next few days in regards to recruiting. Georgia's got a few announcements coming up, a few guys, few targets they've really keyed in on and are hoping to get good news from. As we're recording this right now, in about 2 hours, Kelton Smith, an offensive lineman from Carver Columbus down there in Columbus, Georgia, is going to announce where he's going. And then on Saturday, 5-star Jonell Aguero is going to announce his decision. How important are these next few days? What do you sort of see around these announcements and in any other developments that might be coming down the pipe for Georgia?
Well, first off with Kelton Smith, we project him to pick Georgia in 2 hours as we record this show. And again, that's an offensive line prospect that is a top 247 prospect. He's inside the top 200 on 24/7 Sports overall. And he brings exactly what Stacey Searles in Georgia wants in this offensive line class, which is versatility. He's a guy that's 6'5", 300 pounds, can play offensive tackle if you need him to, but can make an outstanding guard as well. And I think that's really what stood out to Georgia and made him a priority early on in this class. And that a lot of eyes on Stacey Searles in the offensive line group, because the last 2 offensive line coaches for Georgia, Sam Pittman, probably the best offensive line coach as far as recruiting that we've seen at Georgia. I mean, the 5-star after 5 stars, he was bringing those guys in. So big shoes to fill there. And then Matt Luke obviously came in and took what Sam did and built an offensive line that helped Georgia to a national championship. So Stacey Searles coming back to Georgia after being at Georgia back when Mark Richt was the head coach. A lot of eyes on him. How can he do? Well, you look at this offensive line class. If he's able to add Kelton Smith to a group that already includes top 100 prospect Bo Hughley at offensive tackle and Joshua Miller, offensive lineman from Virginia that they had in camp, and he basically earned a spot in camp by impressing the coaching staff. He's got the basis of an outstanding offensive line group. And then if he can land a guy like Monroe Freeling from South Carolina, another top 100 prospect at offensive tackle, that's exactly what you hope to look for in your offensive line class. A couple top 100 prospects at offensive tackle, a couple guys on the interior who can play multiple positions but have a lot of upside. So I think Kelton Smith would add to a solid group and make it a very good group with potential to be a great group. And he was a guy that a lot of schools projected to Florida State early on, and then LSU and Texas A&M moved into the mix. So that's a big-time win for Georgia if they land him today. And then Jonell Aguero has been at the top, if not the top of Georgia's safety board throughout this cycle. A guy that is ranked, whether it's the 3rd best safety in the composite, 2nd best safety overall on 24/7 Sports. He's a huge prospect for Georgia and Fran Brown as he continues to work on, what looks to be an outstanding secondary class for Georgia. Another new assistant coach for Georgia, first-year coach, who came in with a lot of expectations. That secondary group last year was the most heralded on paper that Georgia had ever signed. And when you get a group like that in, often it's tough to get, the big time commitments in the next cycle, because they look at those guys and they're like, well, where am I going to see playing time? Well, Fran Brown has a chance tomorrow if he lands Aguero, which we project Georgia to do, to add to a group that already has a 5-star in AJ Harris, already has Justin Rhett from Las Vegas, Nevada, a guy who could play corner, he could play nickel, he could play star. And Daniel Harris, a very impressive cornerback from Miami, Florida, that really checks all the boxes for Georgia in terms of that length, that size you look for. And we can't even forget the fact that he also got a guy in Marcus Washington who's already enrolled at Georgia, reclassified, is already on campus. So I think the secondary group for Fran Brown is going to be very impressive. And I think Georgia recruiting, it was I think a week or two ago, there were whispers of maybe Georgia struggling in recruiting, and now they get these two guys in the next 24 hours. They're going to be number 3 in the 24/7 sports team rankings. So I think Kirby Smart and this Georgia staff have a chance to still do pretty well in this recruiting thing.
My, how the tables turn, Kipp.
How
Well,
the turntables turn.
there you go. You got it. Well, all right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Appreciate Kipp hopping on. Appreciate you guys watching, especially everybody on Facebook tuning in for this Facebook Live. Just keep an eye out. We'll have all kinds of coverage of these announcements coming up, and anything else from these next few days. It's kind of the we're coming to the very end, pretty much, of the off season, but still very busy. Still got a lot of good nuggets from SEC Media Days from talking to those guys. So there's going to be no shortage of stories. Appreciate everybody watching. Again, I would shout out and say make sure to subscribe to the Dogs 247 YouTube channel. Go check that out. But we'll get out of here on that. For Kipp Adams, I'm Jordan Hill. And until next time, take care.